Hi there, we're going to make the Tumbling Blocks Get Squared blanket, the variant one. It's a really pretty textured blanket, but I'm completely aware that without a video it's actually really difficult to construct. I will improve the pattern, but I still think irrespective of how I write it, I will write it much better, I do promise that. But irrespective of how I write it, you really do need a video to show you how to make this blanket. It's really pretty. It's once you get the hang of it, it's so quick and easy to work up. So what I'm going to do is step through this really, really slowly so that hopefully by the end of a number of rounds, you'll be on board with how to make this blanket. I'm using what we call in Australia 10-ply, or elsewhere I guess you call it worsted weight, Iran as well. It's maybe a little bit thicker, but category 4 yarn. You can use any ply of yarn that you want, but just make sure that you have the appropriate hook size for that yarn. I happen to be using a 5mm hook. So what I'm going to do first up is actually make a circle. You can make a circle using, say, 3 chains and then slip stitch into the 3rd chain to close the circle off. So I'll just show you. This is not actually my preferred method, but that's fine if you want to do it that way. I just find for me it tends to, unless you're using really, really thick yarn, tends to leave it just a little bit too much of a hole or gap. So if I do 1, 2, 3 chains and then slip stitch into the first chain there, like so. Just going to move that tail out of the way. So I'm now slip stitching. So now I've got a circle that I can work my stitches into. You see the circle there? So what I do is when I work my stitches, just do 3 chains to start with, I would then work them into the circle. So I put my hook through the circle from the front to the back and work stitches over the edges of that circle, like so. Just to give you an idea. But that's not my preferred method, so I'll just pull that apart. But feel free if you want to do it that way, absolutely, no problems about that. So what I like to do is do a magic circle. Lots of different ways to do a magic circle. Everybody has their own preference for that, that's fine. Look up some videos on YouTube and see which one you like and then follow that. So I'll just pull, so I've made basically a double loop here. The tail's on one end to the left here, and I'm going to use my hook to pull the yarn through from back to the front in the middle of the circle there. And then what I'm going to do is make 1, 2, 3 chains, and then I'm going to double crochet into the circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times. Now, instead of doing 3 chain to begin with, you could do a standing stitch if that's your preference. It's probably not going to matter terribly much for the centre of this blanket because there's quite a lot of stitches worked into this little circle, so it's not that obvious that the 3 chains are a little bit thinner than the other stitches, but it's up to you as to how you want to do that. So now I'm just going to pull on the tail of my magic circle to close that circle. And all I need to do now is do a slip stitch into the top of that 3 chain that we made to commence the round. So that's these this stitch here. You can see we did the 1, 2, 3 chain, and so it's that third chain there that we want to slip stitch into. I like to slip stitch under both loops, but again, that's just a preference. There is a special invisible slip stitch that you can also do, but I think just to keep this simple, we might just do a standard slip stitch. Okay, so I've now completed the circle round. Now, what I want to do, so we get the textured effect of the tumbling blocks or the corner to corner stitch, we alternate right side and wrong side. So we're actually going to do that too for this blanket, even though it's worked in the round, we're still going to do it that way. So what I'm going to now do is turn my work to the wrong side. In order to make the 4 corner blocks that are maintained throughout, this blanket is a square shape, so it needs 4 corners. In order to do that, we need to actually make some chains to stand for that first corner block that we're going to make. It doesn't matter which stitch you work into here, but as you can see, it's probably easier to work into the one that's just immediately counterclockwise to where the slip stitch was made. So I'm going to make 1, 2, 3 chains, and then I'm going to work into the next stitch. Then I'll make 2 DCs. So we made 1 DC in that next stitch from where we did the 3 chains. Then in the next stitch from there, I'm going to do 2 lots of double crochet stitches. So we've got 3 chain, and then in the next stitch we've got 1 DC, and then in the next stitch along we've got 2 DCs now. And then in the very next stitch along we're going to make another double crochet stitch like so. Now what we're going to do is make the edge of the corner. So we've made 1 edge of the corner this side, and we've stitched along the top of the corner, and now we need to make the other edge of the corner here. So what I'm going to do is work 3 chain, and I'm going to now slip stitch into, you can probably see at the base of the stitch that last double crochet was worked into. I want to slip stitch straight back into that same stitch at the base of it. So set my hook and slip stitch through like so. So that's one corner. Now in order to make the other corners, we need to slip stitch across to the next stitch first up, so like so, still going counterclockwise, and I'm going to repeat exactly the same process, so all the corners are made the same way. The first 4 corners are a little bit different to the corners that are made throughout the rest of the blanket, as you'll see, but these ones are quite easy. The next ones get a little bit more tricky, but we'll start with these ones. So 3 chains. Now what we want to do is work a double crochet in the same stitch that those 3 chains originated from. So that's here, you can see the base of that stitch. So I'm going to put my hook back in there and make a double crochet stitch. And then in the next stitch, I'm going to do 2 double crochet stitches. This is just to make the corners a little bit plumper, otherwise they can look a bit thin and you get a bit more of a transparent look on the blanket, which is not ideal. So now I need to work the last bit of my corner into the last stitch here. So the corners, each corners, we've got 12 stitches from the first round, and so each of the corners are comprised of 3 stitches from the first round. So you can see I've used 2 stitches for this corner. Now I want to use the third one, so I'm going to make a double crochet, and then I'm going to work 1, 2, 3 chains again. Same process, and remember now we slip stitch back into the base of that double crochet. So the stitch from the previous round that double crochet originated from, we want to slip stitch into there. So set the hook from front to back and work a slip stitch like so. you can actually pull those slip stitches quite firmly as well, just so that you get a nice finish. So the corners are quite distinct. Now I'm going to slip stitch across now to the next stitch from the previous round. So now we're working into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches from the previous round to make another corner. So that will be our third corner. 1, 2, 3 chains, double crochet into the base, that stitch that the 3 chains originated from, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, like so. And then finally, to finish off the corner like we did before, we do a double crochet. And this is where we work our 1, 2, 3 chains. And then we simply slip stitch back into the stitch that the 3 chains originated from, like so. So that's 3 corners done. We're on the wrong side at the moment. Just pull that slip stitch tight, and now I'm going to slip stitch across, stitch here, so next stitch around, work my 1, 2, 3 chains again to start the corner off. So we're making our last corner now over the last 1, 2, 3 stitches, double crochet, and then in the next stitch 2 double crochet stitches, just making those corners nice and plump. And then finally in the next stitch, a double crochet, and remember to do the 1, 2, 3 chains, and then slip stitch right back into the base of that double crochet again, which finishes off the round. So what I might do is continue on, and we'll do the third round. See how we're going. So what we now need to do in order to start the third round, which is going to be on the right side, we need to actually get, if we're continuing on with the same colour, which I want to do at this point in time, we need to actually slip stitch back up to the top of this loop here so that we can work over it from top to bottom. So in order to do that, what I need to do is slip stitch into this next stitch along from the previous round. So I'm just going to go into there like so. Remember, we're still on the wrong side, so it doesn't matter if you pop a little stitch like that there. And now what I want to do is slip stitch into this space here. So that's between, on that first corner block that we made, that's between the 3 chain and the first DC, there's a space there. So I want to slip stitch into that. So put my hook in from front to back, pull the yarn through like that. And I'm just going to do that again. So all I'm going to do is stick my hook through again and pull through another loop like so. All I'm trying to do basically is get up to the top of this 3 chain and do it in a reasonably neat fashion. Like I said, that's going to go on the back of the blanket, so you won't be seeing that. And then once I'm there, I want to do 1, 2, 3 chains. Okay, now I can turn my work around because the next round, the third round, needs to be worked on the right side again. So I'm going to turn my work. Now, what you can see here is that I need to fill this space here. So I've made the first 3 chains just to help me to start filling that space. If you've done tumbling block or corner to corner stitch before, you understand how we work over loops. And in this case here, we're going to work over this particular loop. So what I'm now going to do after I've worked the 1, 2, 3 chains is yarn over, because we're going to make DCs. We're just working DCs. That's very easy. DCs and slip stitches and chains basically. So it's quite easy. Once you get the hang of working this method of doing the tumbling blocks in the round, it's actually very quick and very easy to work. So now I'm going to work my double crochets over that loop there. So 1, 2. There is an option that you can work, we've done 3 here. There's an option that you can work 2 double crochet stitches instead of 3. If you've got particularly chunky yarn, you might prefer that. If you want a bit more of an airy blanket, you might prefer that. It does change the appearance a fair bit. I prefer the 3, but it's something that you could try if you wanted to experiment around. So now I've completed my first tumbling block, and we need to maintain 4 corners on every single round. That's how we keep the square shape of our blanket. So we've made a tumbling block. Now we need to actually make the corners. Now what I'm going to do is skip this first 3 chain here. I'm not going to worry about that at all. I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet there, like so. 1, 2. Now, this is where this round we start what I call the loopy corners, and we work over loops of the corner instead of straight into the stitches like we did previously. It just gives the blanket a much more consistent appearance, because with your tumbling blocks you're working over loops, so we may as well work over loops for our corners as well. It does make it a little bit trickier to understand, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be flying through it, and it will be very easy. So what we do is 3 chains, and we want to slip stitch into this DC here. So it's the last DC of the corner. We're not slip stitching into the top of the 3 chain, but we're slip stitching into the last double crochet stitch of the corner. So you can see here there's the first double crochet stitch, the second and third double crochet stitch, which are in the center of that corner, and then the third double crochet stitch, which is towards the edge of that. So I want to slip stitch into that, like so. That tight. Now you can either do 3 chain back or 4 chain back. Depends how big you want your loops to be. I might just do 3 chain just for simplicity's sake. If you want it to be a little bit gappier, you could do 4 chain. This makes it a little bit tighter. So now what I need to do is turn my work, as I've just done, and I'm looking for where the 3 chain that we first did, not the one we've just last done, but 3 chain that we first did actually originated from. And you can see here this double crochet that it's originated from, the top of that double crochet stitch. So I want to slip stitch back into there. All I'm really trying to do is form a loop to work that corner over, but of course we have to be working in the right direction, so I have to go one way first and back the other way. All right. Now what I'm going to do is just do 3 chains, because we need to go up and make this corner bigger. Okay, and then turn my work back over again. So you're doing a couple of turns there. Once you've done your first chain and 3 chain and stitched into that DC, you have to turn it so that it's easier then to slip stitch back into the first DC that you worked into. Then we want to turn it back again, so now we can work in the right direction to make our first corner. So we've done our first tumbling block already, and we need to go in the anti-clockwise direction. So now what I'm going to do is just work my double crochet stitches straight over those 2 loops, so both of them. Make them reasonably firmly. So I'm going for 4, just to make the corners nice and plump. Okay. So I have 4 there. Now what I want to do is 3 chain, like so. And instead of slip stitching into the gap here, the loop here, I'm going to slip stitch in to the DC where we slip stitched our first 3 chain into. So you can see that here. So not in here, but in here, like so. Okay, now to make our next tumbling block, what we're going to do is slip stitch across to this next loop gap here. So just want to slip stitch across to there, like so. And we need to 3 chain to get the height that we need for that block again. Like so. And then we're going to work the 3 double crochet stitches over that block, that loop, or the 2 if that's what your preference is. So I'm just doing those 3 now. So now we've got 2 tumbling blocks and 1 corner for this round. So we need to make the other corners and the other tumbling blocks to fill those gaps as well. So again, to make the next corner, we're going to skip all the 3 chain stitches, and into the first DC that we find, we're going to do a slip stitch like so. Then 1, 2, 3 chains. This is the first loop of that loopy corner. And again, we're not slip stitching into the chains there, but we're looking for the last double crochet stitch in that corner from the previous round. So I'm going to slip stitch into that like so. Then I'll do my 3 chains again. This is where we have to turn and find the stitch that the first 3 chain originated from and slip stitch into that stitch. So you can see it just there. So I'm going to slip stitch into there. If you don't get the exact location of slip stitch correct, it's really not going to matter, especially when you're just learning. It won't make much difference to the appearance of your blanket if you go sort of 1 stitch across or you accidentally put it into the loop rather than a stitch. That's okay. Okay, so now we're going to chain 3 chains, turn our work back over. Now, what we need to do is work over that double loop that we just made to make our next loopy corner. So I'm going to do 4 double crochet stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like so. So now we have 2 tumbling blocks and 2 loopy corners. So we have 2 tumbling blocks to go and 2 corners to go. So 3 chain and slip stitch not into the loop here, but into the next stitch along, which is where the 3 chain, the first 3 chain was slip stitched into, and the second 3 chain originated from. So just into that particular stitch again, like so, and then remember to slip stitch across to this next loop here that you're going to work the tumbling block over. It's just a little bit neater to do that. If you forget to slip stitch across, not that big a deal. Doesn't really matter. You probably won't even notice. Certainly somebody who doesn't crochet wouldn't even notice. So now we're going to do 3 chains so we can get the height of that next tumbling block. And then we're going to work over that loop, that corner loop. 1, 2, 3. Like so. Then, remembering to skip all 3 of those 3 chains, I want to slip stitch into the top of that first double crochet stitch in the next corner. And another loopy corner, so 1, 2, 3 chains, slip stitch into the top of the last double crochet in that particular corner, like so. 1, 2, 3, and turn work to make it easier to slip stitch into the stitch. It was the first double crochet, the stitch that the first 3 chain originated from, just like so. So now we've made our 2 loops to work our corner over. So we need to 3 chain to get the height of the corner, turn our work so we can work the corner in the right direction. And now we're going to work those 4. Hopefully you picked me up there and you knew. So 4 double crochet stitches over those 2 loops. Let's make sure I can count properly. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can, remarkably, despite the sleep deprivation from one particular child. So now we're going to 3 chain and then slip stitch not into the loop but into the next stitch along, which is where the first 3 chain was slip stitched into and the last 3 chain were originated from. So back into that same stitch again. Those stitches are getting a lot of love, aren't they? And then what we do is we slip stitch across then into this loop here that we want to work our tumbling block. So just slip stitch across, 1, 2, 3 chains to again to stand for that height of the tumbling block. Now work out 3 double crochet stitches, and hopefully by now you're sort of starting to see the way this blanket's formed. I will do some more rounds, probably put these in a separate video. I think this is probably getting reasonably long and you might want to practice the rounds to this point. Once you get it, it will actually be really, really easy and you'll be whipping up a blanket super quick, because that's the best thing about these. They work up really, really quickly. Okay, so now we need to skip those 3 chains and slip stitch into that first double crochet stitch instead. Right, so as you can see, we are just missing, all we're missing now is a corner. And then we're done. So let's do that. So 3 chains again to get your height for your corner. And I want to slip stitch across into that last DC stitch. It's pretty obvious this time around because we've got stitches worked over the chain stitches here. So slip stitch across to that one. Then do my 3 chains again. Turn my work like so. Make it easier to slip stitch into the stitch that we need to. So again, slip stitching into this particular stitch here. Reusing those stitches a lot. Do our 3 chains that we need for our block to give it the right height. Now turn our work again, and then we're going to work over those 2 loops to work our block. So 4 double crochets over those 2 loops. Like so. Now all we need to do is do our 3 chains to finish off this particular block. And as you remember, not slip stitching into this the loop here, loop gap here, but instead slip stitching into the stitch that the 3 chains are joined into or originate from the loops. Okay, like so. So I'll just pop that down so you get a bit of an idea as to how it will appear. So as you do more rounds, the textured effect of the tumbling blocks becomes more and more apparent. It's a super neat way to make up a really big blanket that has, you know, a great appeal because the texture is really lovely. You can do all sorts of color combinations, like you can change colors each round, or you can do 3 rounds or 2 rounds. And what I often quite like to do is I either start the blanket changing each round, and then when I've worked through my colors, I change every 2 rounds, and then when I've worked through colors again, I change every 3 rounds. Or you can do the opposite. You can start with like 1 color for 4 rounds, then work through your colors and do 1 color for 3 rounds. You can mix it up. You can do some colors have, you know, 2 or 3 rounds, other colors only have 1. So all sorts of different combinations that you can really put your individual slant on it and make it your own and make it a bit of fun. So great for baby blankets, great for throw rugs. I've got about 3, actually maybe 4 really big ones of these, and my boys absolutely love them because they're so warm and they love poking their fingers through the loops on the tumbling blanket as tumbling blocks as well. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll make another video for the next couple of rounds. Hopefully that's helped a bit. I will, like I said, I'll try to make the instructions a little bit clearer as well, but I think the video is really the key to being able to work this blanket. All right, thank you. Bye.